it was when I got a coach that it really started to open up for me, that I really started to actually see what was going on and what had been running my life. On the front, the lie I was telling myself was that I had my shit together. But in actual fact, beneath all of that, I really, really didn't. And I was afraid to surrender to that. Good day, gentlemen, and potentially any ladies out there as well. Welcome to another episode of The Powerful Man Show. I'm your host, Tim Matthews, and I'm joined by the wonderful, remarkable Mr. Doug Holt. How are you, sir?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you so much. And you can introduce me that way anytime you want, man. How are you doing?
Yeah, phenomenal. Do you know what? I think this may be episode number 6, 7, or even 8. And I've been waiting to introduce you like that ever since we began. So it was my absolute honor and delight to be able to do that. So Doug, I'm going to dive straight into this because this is a question that I've been considering quite a lot from the men that we've been dealing with over the past few years, but even more so, this has been coming up really present of late. And the question is, are you paying the price? Are you paying the price today for mistakes you've made in the past?
Ooh, good question. We see this come up all the time with the guys. It's almost like Groundhog's Day, right? Kind of that movie Groundhog's Day where Bill Murray's in there and every time he wakes up, it's the same story over and over and over again.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for the guys that we've been speaking with, the reason why this has been playing on my mind so much is because this week in particular, there have been 4 or 5 guys that I've spoken to as soon as they come into the program, and the common theme for them was the guilt and the shame and the resentment that they were carrying towards themselves from mistakes that they made in the past. And unknowing to them, they were hanging on to it, but then condemning themselves to a life in the present that they don't like or enjoy because underneath it all, they didn't feel like they deserved to be happy and to have the success that they wanted. So although they were going out there and taking the actions and doing the work, one of 2 things happened. They either achieve results but are unable to enjoy it, or they sabotage themselves. And it does feel like Groundhog Day. I mean, I know I was there for many years, many years, and just the frustration that I used to experience from not knowing what was going on. You know, I'd wake up in the morning, I'd be really fired up to go about the day, really committed, I'd be focused. I felt like I was doing all the right things, you know, all the things that everybody in the personal development space, if you will, tells you to do. You know, the whole motivation, the morning routine, working out, journaling. I was doing everything, but no matter what I did, some way, somehow, I would always seem to sabotage myself. If I made money, it'd then find its way away from me. I'd then spend it to feel good. I'd splurge it because, again, unknowing to me, just like the men that we've been speaking to this week, underneath it all, I didn't feel deserving of having what I really desired. And it was a really, really frustrating time for me.
So what did you do, Tim, to break that cycle for yourself?
Wow. What did I do to break that cycle for myself? Well, you know, if I'm quite honest, I actually got a coach. And it's quite ironic that, you know, I say that. I don't say that in order to just, you know, do a pitch. I got a coach. And the way in which it came about was I actually became friends with someone. I met somebody, a guy who was working his business online. He was working from anywhere in the world, earning more money, helping more people. And he was a real life example of everything that I read about and everything that I watched. He was the real life example right there in front of me of what was possible. I was blown away. I was blown away by this guy who was also younger than me that he was living this lifestyle. And back then I had the fitness franchise, Fitness for Mum. And I was grinding it out. And I wore that as a badge of honor. I can remember going to bed some nights and thinking, okay, how many hours did I work today? 16 hours. Oh, and such a feeling of contentment came over me because I'd worked so hard. And I'd shown up and I'd taken all this action and I had this massive to-do list. I just loved ticking things off. Boom, 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 boom. And when I met him, the thing that stood out to me about him, or one of the things that stood out to me about him, was how easy his life was and how he embraced that, and how that was, how that was a real area of pride for him. It's something that I just didn't understand, because my model of success was that, if you didn't work hard, then it wasn't worth having. Perseverance, again, all those things that the early personal development work that I did taught me to believe and told me to do. So when I got chatting to him and asking him, well, how do you do it, basically, he told me that he had a coach. And I always used to think that coaching was something that was so far out of my reach, so far outside of my reach. And I never even considered it. I very much was a lone wolf, and I'd listen to audiobooks in my car, I'd read books, I'd speak to people, but I very much kept my problems per se to myself. It was almost as though I didn't want to admit weakness or admit defeat in case anyone deemed it as weakness. And, I didn't appear to be the man that everyone thought I was. So I wore that whole mask. And when I met this friend of mine, my life had really hit rock bottom in many respects. I just ended a relationship that I'd been in for 7 years, and in actual fact, we were engaged. We'd booked the wedding, we'd bought the house, we'd done everything, and I called it all off because it was a very abusive relationship on many different levels. I'd just been getting robbed of tens of thousands of pounds in a bad business deal that I should never have got into. I went into it out of desperation. And the fitness franchise that I had was complete chaos. I was attracting problem clients. I was working long hours. I was undercharging for my services. I was putting out fires in every area of my life. So to see this guy in front of me just blew me away. And when he told me I had a coach, in all honesty, I didn't take any action on it at first. I let the weeks go by, the months go by, stayed in contact with this guy. Looking back, I don't know who I was trying to kid, because I think it was a pride thing. I just didn't want to surrender to the fact that I needed help, if you will. And it was when I got a coach that it really started to open up for me, that I really started to actually see what was going on and what had been running my life. I'd never, ever considered that I had a low self-worth. I'd never considered it. I was a good-looking guy. I went out there. I'd get stuff done in the gym. I'd get stuff done in business. And, on the front, the lie I was telling myself was that I had my shit together. But in actual fact, beneath all of that, I really, really didn't. And I was afraid to surrender to that. When I got this coach, they, really highlighted some things to me that were going on, because at the end of the day, we can't see our own blind spots. When we're that far in the forest, sometimes you just can't see the trees. It's difficult sometimes to fly at a bird's eye view and actually take inventory of what's going on. And that's what this coach did for me. And that really is what sparked a change.
That's awesome, man. I mean, you did the things, you did a couple of things. One is you raised your hand, right? And you said, hey, look, something's going on here and I could use a little help. And that takes a lot of courage. And not a lot of people are willing to step into that courage. And that's why a lot of people experience this Groundhog Day, right? Time and time again, because they're hiding out through this, this fake machismo, and as you said, the mask of everything's great. And they know it's not. And, they get home and they sedate themselves. A common thing, right, guys? Sit on the couch and crack a few beers, watch Monday Night Football if you're in the States. If you're in the UK or in Europe, you're watching soccer or what have you. But, you just check out. You don't want anybody to know. It's like you go to those networking events and you see everybody walking around with a cheesy smile. They're not that happy. It's a similar thing, right?
Yeah, completely. I can remember the group of friends that I had back then. I was I wore a complete mask. I really did. Looking back, and I knew I was wearing it. Like I knew that I was wearing it. And the way that I knew that I was wearing it is because I could feel that something wasn't right. I could feel the lies that I was telling. And it wasn't that I wasn't telling the truth in terms of what was going on in my life. I was telling the truth, but the lie was that I didn't actually want any of it. And that I'd lie with, like you just said, telling people how I felt. You know, oh, how are you doing? Yeah, I'm great. When in reality, I felt like shit. I was burnt out. I was overworked. I felt very lonely. I felt like I couldn't actually tell any of my friends. Back then, actually, Doug, I didn't know anybody in personal development. You know, Tom, the guy, one of my good friends, he was the first guy I actually met who was into this kind of world. So all the guys I was surrounded by, you know, down at the pub, you know, it was all bravado. You know, we'd go down there, they'd be talking about, again, how hard they worked. They'd be moaning about the jobs. They'd be moaning about the partners. You know, it just wasn't a very empowering conversation to be part of. Nothing against them by any means. You know, I still have a lot of love and respect for them. But I wanted something different for my life. And I didn't know anybody in personal development. So again, I felt very lonely. I didn't feel like I had anyone to talk to be honest. You know, my ex-girlfriend, my girlfriend at the time, she just didn't support me at all. She didn't support my hopes, my dreams, my desires. I can remember I used to listen to audiobooks in my car. And this one time, although it's happened on multiple times, but this one time I picked her up from work and she got into the car and I had, I think, Tony Robbins, you know, a classic audiobook on. And she just got in the car and was like, what is this? Turn it off. Like, and I'm like, really? Is there any need for that kind of reaction? Like, come on. And, you know, I then picked her up in her car once and I was doing the same thing and she got in, she had the same reaction. She said, oh, but this is my car. You don't listen to this in my car. I just thought, all right, well, when I pick you up in my car, I'll listen to it. And then when I did pick her up in my car, still, same reaction. The point I'm making is she didn't support my hopes or dreams. Not even that she had to, not even that I wanted her to show interest in them, but just supporting them. It was another example of where I was settling and sacrificing my own life out of fear, to be honest. You know, this is somebody that I then proposed to and booked a wedding with and bought a house with, which all was out of people pleasing and neediness and desperation. But yeah, I just felt very, very alone. I didn't have anyone to speak to about this. And I think that's one of the reasons why it went on for so long.
Hey guys, I want to interrupt this episode because I want to talk to you about something important. We put together a case study on how almost 300 men have taken control of their lives. They're 4Xing their business revenues and they're having more connected and intimate sex, all without sacrificing their relationships or their health by using the activation method. Now, a lot of you have contacted us and they want to know how they're doing it. We put together this short 11-minute case study just for you, so you can see how these entrepreneurs are achieving this level of success. To get this case study, all you have to do is go over to thepowerfulman.com/11. Yep, that's 11. And you can get the case study right now. All right, it's only 11 minutes and it's going to show you exactly how these men have done it. All right, let's get back to the episode.
You know, it's interesting, you know, as you're talking about this, I can't help but be, you know, I talk about this in our last show, but taken back to the last Alpha Reset that we did and some of the exercises we took some of the men through that had this common complaint. And what happens is there's an underlying current that's running for a lot of these guys, right? It's running the show for them and women. They're listening to this, but obviously it's the powerful man. And this underlying current is a current of beliefs and a current of fears. And until you're willing to peel back the layers and do the work, the deep work that counts, you will always be operating by that underlying current, right? And we often talk about, okay, well, where's that underlying current come from? Well, you know, it comes from us as kids, right? You know, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's even just say that, you know, it's our 15-year-old self. But most likely when we we deal with these guys, it's something we takes them back to about when they're 5 or 6. And that's when we're building kind of our roadmaps of life, like the way things should be, right? And, the common joke, Tim, that you and I will use with these guys is, have you taken time to look at these belief systems, that are underlying these patterns? And most of these guys say no. And then we ask them, okay, well, where did you first start thinking of this? And, of course, they hem and haw because they don't really want to go there. But when we get them to go there, they start talking about, when I was 6 years old, this happened. And, that's when I made this decision about this is the way life should be. And they started living their life that way. And of course, you would throw it out there, hey, look, would you allow a 6-year-old to drive your car? Would you allow a 6-year-old to run your business? Would you allow a 6-year-old to make decisions in your relationships? And the answer is obviously no. Yet day to day to day, these guys are doing it. And that's why they're experiencing Groundhog's Day, right? It's the same thing. No matter what they're doing, they're bringing their old self, their underlying beliefs and fears into these situations time and time again without actually doing the deep work to clear that and rewrite that story.
Exactly. And that's exactly how, or one of the ways in which they're paying the price today for mistakes they made in the past. And, for me, there were a couple of key elements that came from the coach, first off pointing out, what was really going on. And the first shift for me was to actually start experiencing some of the emotions that I'd been suppressing all my life and identifying where they came from. And for me, a lot of it came from the relationship that I had with my father and the lack of love that I received and the fear-based environment that I grew up in. For most of my life, as you know, Doug, I didn't feel like I could be myself around my family, which is a very, very weird feeling to return home and feel yourself shut down as you walk through the door and, just want to go under the radar in your own home. It's a very, very weird feeling. I can remember being out of the home and feeling free and feeling happy and boisterous and, being loving sport and all that kind of stuff. And then coming home and just, treading on eggshells around my father. And, he did it his way and he did it the best that he could do it with the tools that he had at the time. But the truth of it is, me being a 6-year-old, like you were talking about, 7-year-olds, I'm forming my model and view of the world as to how does this world operate and who must I be in this world in order to stay safe, loved and protected. I very much took on the belief that in order for me to stay safe, loved and protected, I must go under the radar. I can't speak my own voice. I've got to people please. And because of the lack of love and connection that I received from my father, my love language is words of affirmation and physical touch. My dad didn't give me either of those. He didn't tell me how good I was, or when I did things well, he didn't praise me, he didn't celebrate me. And he also didn't show me affection through hugs, through kisses, through eye contact. And as a result, I really started to take on the belief that I wasn't good enough. And it wasn't even, a mistake that I made in the past. The title of this show is, Are You Paying the Price Today for Mistakes You Made in the Past? For me, it wasn't even a mistake per se that I made in the past, but I was paying prices when I was, 25, 22, 23, when I started my first business. And I couldn't understand why it was such a struggle. As I then went into, launched the fitness business and the fitness franchise, all the different businesses, the same problems kept showing up. And the problems, they weren't around creativity. They weren't around having ideas or having motivation to get the ideas done. They weren't around anything to do with that. They were around money and self-worth and leadership. They're around those kind of elements. And that's where I then start to fall down and pay the price from how I then felt when I was 5, 6, 7 years old. I was bringing that into, I say today, but when I was 28, 29, I was bringing it into that day and that year. And I couldn't, I was literally, like I said at the start of the show, condemning myself to a life that I didn't like or enjoy, because underneath all of it, I didn't feel like I deserved it. And when I started to work with this coach, the first thing was to hold that mirror up and acknowledge my blind spots, identify where it came from, like I said, and then actually start to release and let go of some of the anger and the shame and the guilt and the sadness that I've been suppressing and holding on to all my life from the lack of love and affection and connection that I experienced from my father. And as also all the frustration that I felt at myself and at the people who had encountered in my life, the relationships primarily, where I'd sacrificed and people pleased. And as you can, I'm sure he can feel me right now. He's bubbling up the same emotions right now. When I just think, fucking hell, what was I doing? So it's key. And another element of this is forgiving yourself too. It was really important for me to forgive myself rather than just continue to beat myself up. Just accept it, become aware of it, accept it, and then allow myself to be who I really am so I can do what I really want and then have what I really deserve.
Be, do, have. I love it.
Exactly. We all know, well, you and I and the men we work with, we all know it starts there. For so long, for most of my life, I was going from the mentality of, do, have, and be, do the action so I can have the money or the car or whatever. And then I'll be happy. I'll be fulfilled, but never works.
No, it doesn't. I mean, but it's hard to sell stuff that way. You can't sell stuff to people when you're like, hey, you could just be happy now. And you're like, what if it was just easy for you? Like, what? No. You'll be happy when you buy my XYZ product, when you make this money, when you get the girl, when you get the trip. And it never turns out to be that case. Tim, in wrapping this up and packaging it for people listening, because I imagine, and I'm certainly was going through so many stories in my head as you were telling yours, to somebody listening to this, it's like, hey, I get it. I keep beating my head against the wall and I'm not getting anywhere. Like, in other words, I'm paying the prices for my past choices. What are a couple things that you would tell them right now as key takeaways?
Couple of things. The first one would be for you to drop the judgment. One of the things that blocks us and blocked me from being able to actually accept where I was and what was going on was the judgments I had around it being right or wrong, good or bad, weak or strong. And, I was basing those judgments from everybody else's view of what success was and what it meant to be a man. And when I was actually able to drop the judgment and accept it just is what it is, what I'm feeling is just what I'm feeling. Sadness isn't a bad emotion. There is no such thing as good and bad emotions. They're all emotions and they all serve an equal purpose. So the first thing I would recommend is for you to drop the judgment and accept where you're at. And then the second thing would be for you to actually create a space where you can start to express some of what you're feeling, whether it is anger, sadness, shame, guilt, resentment. There are different things you can do in order to do that, such as, for me, with my father, I had a conversation with him where I asked him if he was proud of me. And it was the most powerful conversation I've ever had. It was phenomenal. It completely eroded a lot of the beliefs that I'd been living with for 28, 29 years of my life. I shared with him how I didn't feel good enough and what I used to choose to believe when I'd come home and I'd walk on eggshells and how I didn't feel like he loved me and everything. It was a really, really powerful conversation. So maybe that's where you get to start. Maybe you get to start by having that conversation with the person that you feel like you've not been able to be good enough with, whether it's your father or your mother or your wife or your kids or whatever. And just say sorry, just apologize for any role that you played in it. And oftentimes we find that we've built this story up in our mind and layered it with so much emotion and we've charged it so much by reliving it over and over in our minds that when you actually have these conversations with these people and apologize or ask them if they're proud of you, whatever, they actually don't even remember the day or the experience that caused you to feel the way you did. Or they were actually never holding on to any guilt or any resentment towards you in the first place. We've just made it up ourselves. And that, in my opinion, is something you can do right now that really help you to stop paying the price today for mistakes you made in the past.
Beautiful, man. Oh, I love it. Guys, you hear it right there from the man himself. This is such a powerful conversation to be had. I'd recommend you listen to this one again. Tim's sharing some gold here. Awesome stuff, brother.
Thank you, man.
Well, that's it for this episode, Tim. I know we got a lot going on. We got another Inner Circle retreat coming up here with the guys flying in from all over the world that we get to prep with and get going. So for everybody listening, thanks for being with us today. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.
Yep. See you later, guys.